Hello, my good friends. How are you today? May God bless you all. I will not introduce anything. You guys watch the video and feel it, then let's evaluate together. The grand ballroom of the Chicago Hilton buzzed with the low hum of intellectual chatter. Therapists, researchers, and educators swapping business cards over lukewarm coffee and mini quiches. It was March 29th, and the National Therapeutic Arts Conference was in full swing. On stage, Hannah Carter stood under the spotlight, her voice steady as she clicked through slides on childhood trauma recovery. At 34, she wasn't the nervous music teacher she'd once been. Her navy dress hugged her frame modestly. Her chestnut hair swept into a loose bun, and her hazel eyes sparkled with quiet confidence. The projector glowed behind her, numbers and graphs painting a story of hope. 83% of kids in her music therapy program showed real progress. The crowd leaned in, some scribbling notes, others nodding like they'd just found the missing piece to their own puzzles. Hannah's hands moved as she spoke, animated but precise, the way they did when she taught Sophie scales on the recorder back home. "It's about giving them a voice," she said, her Texas drawl softened by years in Portland. "Music doesn't just heal, it lets them speak when words fail." Applause rippled through the room as she stepped off stage, wiping her palms on her dress. She was halfway to the exit, weaving through the sea of blazers and lanyards when a shadow caught her eye. A man lingered near a pillar, hands stuffed in the pockets of a gray sweater that hung loose on his frame. His hair was streaked with silver now, his face sharper than she remembered. But those green eyes, damn it, those eyes, were unmistakable. Ethan Reynolds. Her stomach flipped, a reflex she hated. 5 years since he'd left her at the altar, 6 months pregnant and clutching a bouquet of wilted peonies. 5 years since she'd rebuilt her life from scratch. And here he was, crashing her moment like a ghost who'd forgotten he was dead. "Hannah," he said, stepping closer, voice low but urgent. "Can we talk? 10 minutes, please?" She froze, her conference badge swinging against her chest. Every instinct screamed to walk away, keep moving, don't look back. But something in his posture, the slump of his shoulders, made her pause. 10 minutes, she said finally, her tone clipped. "Lobby bar, that's it." The bar was a dimly lit corner of the hotel, all polished wood and overpriced cocktails. Ethan slid into the booth across from her, his knuckles white around a glass of untouched scotch. Hannah ordered a sparkling water, her fingers tapping the table like she was counting down the seconds. "I read about your work," he started, eyes flicking up to meet hers. "What you've built, it's incredible." "Save it, Ethan." She leaned back, arms crossed. "Why are you here?" He exhaled, a shaky breath that smelled faintly of regret. "I owe you the truth. 5 years ago, I left because I had cancer, stage 3 pancreatic. Docs gave me 6 months, maybe a year with treatment. I couldn't put you through that, not with a baby on the way." The words hit like a punch to the gut, knocking the air from her lungs. "Cancer?" Her mind raced, replaying that day in Austin. The church, the note, the silence. She stared at him, searching for the lie she knew had to be there. "You're telling me you ditched me at the altar because you were dying, and you didn't think to, I don't know, tell me?" "I couldn't face it," he said, voice cracking. "Making you a widow, leaving Sophie with just a memory of a sick dad. It felt cleaner to let you hate me." "Cleaner?" Her laugh was sharp, bitter. "You left me 6 months pregnant, Ethan. I almost lost her that day, contractions in the ER alone. You don't get to call that clean." His face crumpled, but she wasn't done. "Prove it," she snapped. "Medical records. If this is true, I want to see them." He nodded, too quick, like he'd been waiting for it. "I'll have them sent over tomorrow. Everything. Diagnosis, treatment, the works." She stood, grabbing her bag. "If you're lying again, Ethan, I swear to God..." She didn't finish the threat. She didn't need to. Morning light sliced through the hotel curtains, casting stripes across the bed where Hannah sat, papers scattered like fallen leaves. The courier had dropped off Ethan's proof an hour ago, a thick manila envelope with hospital logos and dates. She'd spread it all out, her coffee cold on the nightstand, her phone pressed to her ear as she called contacts from her grad school days in Austin. "Yeah, check the patient ID format," she told a nurse friend, her voice tight. "Something's off." She flipped pages, pathology reports, chemo schedules, a remission letter dated 8 months after he'd bolted. It looked real, too real, and for a moment she let herself wonder, what if he's telling the truth? Her chest tightened, a mix of anger and something softer she refused to name. Then her phone buzzed, her friend texting back. "No ID codes in the header. UMC always uses them. Fake as hell." The room spun. She grabbed a scan report, eyes zeroing in on a signature. Dr. Elaine Peterson. Her mom's name, Diane's middle name, slapped onto a radiologist who didn't exist. A laugh escaped her, wild and furious. He'd forged it all. Every damn page. She was on her feet, storming down to the hotel restaurant where Ethan waited, his hopeful smile fading as she slammed the papers onto the table. Heads turned, a waiter pausing mid-step. "You faked it all, didn't you?" Her voice trembled, loud enough to draw stares. "The cancer, the remission, everything." Ethan's mouth opened, then closed. He sank back in his chair, defeated. "It was real at first," he admitted, barely audible. "Stage 1, treatable. But I panicked, Hannah. I wasn't ready to be a dad, a husband. I let it spiral." "Spiral?" She leaned in, eyes blazing. "You made me think I wasn't enough, that I drove you to some mistress. And now you pull this bullshit, fake cancer, to what? Crawl back into my life?" "I wanted a chance," he said, voice breaking, "to know Sophie. To fix. There's no fixing this." She cut him off, her finger jabbing the air. "You're a liar, Ethan. You'll always be a liar, and I'm done letting you play me." She turned on her heel, the restaurant a blur of shocked faces. Ethan called after her, "Hannah, wait!" But she didn't stop. Her hands shook as she strode to the elevator, the weight of 5 years crashing down. He wasn't just a coward, he was a con man, weaving stories to dodge the mess he'd made. Back in her room, Hannah stared out at Chicago's skyline, the Willis Tower piercing the gray dawn. She pulled out her laptop, fingers flying as she typed an email to Mia Torres, an investigative journalist she'd met at a Portland fundraiser. Subject, a story bigger than me. She attached the fake records, a time-stamped recording of Ethan's confession from her phone. It was real at first, stage 1, and a note. "He's been lying for years, corporate leaks too. I'll go on record but protect my daughter." She hit send, her breath steadying. The city stretched out below, cold and indifferent. But she felt something shift inside her. Anger hardening into resolve. Ethan thought he could rewrite their past with a stack of lies. Not this time. As the email confirmation pinged, she whispered to herself, "This ends now." Hey, if Hannah and Ethan's showdown hooked you, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's next. Drop a comment. Do you think Ethan's got any shot at redemption, or is he toast? Stick around. We're diving into the messy past that got them here. The little white church on South Congress Avenue in Austin, Texas, smelled like roses and nervous anticipation. It was September 12, 2020, a Saturday afternoon with the kind of golden sunlight that made everything feel like a postcard. Inside, Hannah Carter paced the bride's room in her wedding dress. Simple lace, off the shoulder, hugging her 6-month baby bump just right. She was 28, her cheeks flushed from excitement and a touch of morning sickness, her hazel eyes darting to the clock every few seconds. The air buzzed with chatter. Her mom, Diane, fussing with the veil, and her big brother Lucas, leaning against the wall in his gray vest, cracking jokes to keep her calm. "Relax, sis," Lucas said, his deep voice cutting through the hum. He was 33, broad-shouldered, a lawyer who'd inherited their dad's height and their mom's stubborn streak. "Ethan's probably just stuck behind some hipster on a scooter. This is Austin, after all." Hannah laughed, smoothing her dress. He better not be late. Sophie's already kicking me like she's ready to walk down the aisle herself. Diane smiled, pinning a stray curl behind Hannah's ear. You look beautiful, honey. Your dad would have... She stopped, the unspoken weight of his absence hanging there. He'd walked out when Hannah was 9, leaving Diane to raise 2 kids alone in a crumbling Houston duplex. Music had pulled Hannah through back then, and now it had led her here. To Ethan. To a new start. The door creaked open, and the wedding coordinator poked her head in, all clipboard and tight smiles. 5 minutes, y'all. Guests are seated, band's ready. Where's the groom? He's coming, Hannah said, though a tiny knot twisted in her gut. Ethan had been edgy all week. Late nights at Reynolds Realty, dodging her calls with excuses about big deals. She'd chalked it up to stress. He loved her. She knew he did. But 5 minutes turned to 10, then 20. The chatter outside grew restless, chairs shifting, whispers rising like static. Lucas checked his phone, frowning. I'll call him. This ain't right. Before he could dial, a teenage usher slipped in, sweaty and wide-eyed, clutching a crumpled note. Ms. Carter? This came from the valet stand. Hannah's hands shook as she unfolded it. Ethan's slanted handwriting stared back. I can't do this. I'm sorry. 4 words, black ink smudged like he'd hesitated before dropping the bomb. The room tilted. What? She whispered, her voice a thread. Lucas snatched the paper, his jaw tightening. That son of a bitch, he growled, already halfway to the door. I'm gonna find him. Lucas, no! Diane grabbed his arm, her voice sharp. Not now! She needs us. Hannah didn't hear them. Pain stabbed through her abdomen, sharp and sudden, doubling her over. Oh, God, she gasped, clutching her belly. Something's wrong. Chaos erupted. Diane yelled for a car. Lucas scooped Hannah up like she weighed nothing, her white dress trailing over his arms. The church blurred past, stunned faces, a dropped bouquet of peonies scattering across the hardwood. Outside, the Texas heat hit like a wall, but all Hannah felt was cold panic. Not my baby, she sobbed, tears streaking her mascara. Please, not my baby. The ER at St. David's was a fluorescent nightmare. Beeping monitors, antiseptic sting, nurses barking orders. Hannah lay on a gurney, her dress bunched around her thighs, an IV dripping into her arm. Lucas paced like a caged lion, fists clenched, while Diane held her hand, whispering, You're okay, honey. You're both gonna be okay. A young doctor with tired eyes leaned in, stethoscope cold against Hannah's skin. Stress-induced contractions, he said, voice calm but firm. We're giving you meds to stop them. Baby's heartbeat is strong, but we need you stable. Hannah nodded, numb, her mind stuck on that note. I can't do this. What couldn't he do? Love her? Be a dad? The questions burned, but the pain dulled as the drugs kicked in, leaving her floating in a haze of grief. 3 hours south in Houston's humid haze, Ethan stood on a marina dock, the Gulf of Mexico stretching out like a dark promise. His tie hung loose, his custom suit wrinkled from the drive. He'd bolted from Austin in his black Mustang, radio off, windows down, trying to outrun the image of Hannah waiting for him. Now, Claire Donovan stepped out of a silver Audi, her blonde hair pulled tight, her tailored blazer screaming power. She was 35, sharp as a blade, with eyes that could cut through bullshit from a mile away. You made the right call ditching her, Claire said, her voice cool, a smirk tugging at her lips. Now we can take down your mom together. Ethan flinched, shoving his hands in his pockets. This isn't about my mom. I couldn't handle it. Claire laughed, low and knowing. Oh, it's bigger than you think, Ethan. Stick with me, you'll see. He frowned, unease creeping up his spine. Claire had been his architect on the Riverwalk project, a downtown Austin redevelopment that could have made him a legend at Reynolds Realty. She'd flirted with him for months, subtle at first, then bold. Late-night drinks, her hand brushing his, promises of a partnership that could outshine his mother's iron grip on the company. Margaret Reynolds, the matriarch, had built the firm from nothing, and she'd molded Ethan to follow her ruthless playbook. But Claire? She'd pitched something different: freedom, ambition, a way out from under Margaret's shadow. "I saw your mom fire me 3 years ago," Claire said, stepping closer, her perfume sharp and expensive. "Over one missed deadline. She humiliated me, Ethan. Now I've got dirt, deals she buried, permits she fudged. You're my ticket to settle the score." Ethan's gut twisted. "You didn't say anything about blackmail." "It's not blackmail," she corrected, voice silky. "It's leverage. You walked away from the altar today. That's step 1. Step 2? We use what I know to take Reynolds Realty apart piece by piece." He stared at her, the weight of his choice sinking in. He'd left Hannah, sweet, stubborn Hannah, who'd trusted him with her whole heart. For this? A revenge plot he hadn't signed up for? But it was too late. The Mustang's keys burned in his pocket, and Claire's smile told him she wasn't letting go. Back in the hospital, Hannah woke to the steady beep of a monitor, her wedding dress swapped for a scratchy gown. Lucas sat beside her, his tie undone, eyes red from holding it together. Diane was on the phone in the hall, arranging a place for them to crash. "She's okay?" Hannah croaked, her hand drifting to her belly. Lucas nodded, squeezing her fingers. "Yeah, sis. Sophie's a fighter just like you." Tears spilled down her cheeks, hot and silent. "He's gone, Lucas. He didn't even say why." Her brother's jaw tightened, a storm brewing behind his calm. "I'll find him. Make him explain." "No," she said, voice firmer than she felt. "I don't want him back. I just want out of here." Diane stepped in, her face etched with exhaustion. "I've got a rental lined up in Portland. 2 bedrooms, quiet street. We leave tomorrow if the doc clears you." Hannah nodded, staring at the ceiling tiles. Austin was her home. Her music gigs, her students, the life she'd built with Ethan. But now it was a graveyard of broken promises. Portland meant a clean slate, a chance to breathe again. She'd pack up her guitar, her dreams, and her baby girl and leave the wreckage behind. Ethan's note lay crumpled on the bedside table, a quiet taunt. She didn't touch it. She didn't need to. The truth was clear. He'd chosen something, someone else, and she'd survive it. Whoa, what a roller coaster, right? If Hannah's fight and Ethan's betrayal got your heart racing, smash that subscribe button so you don't miss what's next. Drop a comment. Should Lucas hunt Ethan down or let him rot? We're headed to Portland for a fresh start. See you there. Rain streaked the windows of the little Portland apartment, a 2-bedroom tucked behind a row of cedar trees in the Alberta Arts District. It was April 2023, and Hannah Carter sat cross-legged on the hardwood floor, a cup of chamomile tea cooling beside her. The place smelled like fresh paint and possibility, nothing like the dusty Austin duplex she'd left behind 2.5 years ago. At 31, she'd traded her wedding dreams for something simpler. A quiet life with Sophie, now a 3-year-old tornado with her daddy's green eyes and her mama's wild curls. Sophie toddled over, clutching a wooden recorder, her tiny fingers fumbling through a shaky rendition of Twinkle, Twinkle. Hannah grinned, setting down the stack of sheet music she'd been sorting. "Look at you, little maestro," she said, her voice soft with that Texas lilt she couldn't shake. "Mrs. Brooks would be proud." Mrs. Evelyn Brooks, her old music teacher from Houston, had called last week, her gravelly voice crackling through the phone. "You've got a gift, Hannah," she'd said. "Don't let it sit on a shelf. Those kids at the school need you." So here she was, teaching part-time at a Portland elementary, tweaking a music therapy program she'd dreamed up during sleepless nights with Sophie. The living room glowed with late afternoon lights spilling over the thrift store couch where Diane napped, a knitting project half finished in her lap. Life wasn't perfect. Money was tight, and Hannah's heart still ached when she thought of Ethan. But it was hers. She'd built it, note by note, from the ashes he'd left her in. Across the country in Austin, Ethan Reynolds wasn't building anything. He stood in the sleek office of Reynolds Realty, staring out at the downtown skyline, the Colorado River glinting under a brutal Texas sun, his tie hung loose, his desk buried under contracts he couldn't focus on. Claire Donovan perched on the edge of his chair, her blonde hair pulled into a severe bun, her voice slicing through the silence. "You're slipping, Ethan," she said, flipping through a folder of emails, dirt she'd dug up on Margaret Reynolds' shadier deals. "Your mom's sniffing around the Riverwalk project. If she finds out what we've got, we're toast." "Then let's use it," he snapped, turning to face her. "You said we'd take her down. What's the holdup?" Claire's smile was cold, calculated. "Patience. We leak this too soon, and it's just noise. We wait, let her overplay her hand, then—" She mimed a throat slash. "She's out and we're in." Ethan's stomach churned. He'd walked away from Hannah for this. Claire's promises of power, a chance to break free from Margaret's chokehold. But 2 years in, it felt less like freedom and more like a cage. Claire wasn't just his partner. She was his warden, dangling blackmail over his head every time he pushed back. Last month, he'd tried to cut ties, and she'd laughed, waving a USB drive. "Walk away and these hit the press," she'd said. "Tax evasion, sweetheart, you signed off on it." He rubbed his temples, the weight of it all pressing down. "I need out, Claire. This isn't what I signed up for." "You signed up the day you ditched your little bride," she shot back, standing to tower over him in her heels. "No backsies, Ethan. We're in this together, or you're in it alone when it blows up." Back in Portland, Hannah's phone buzzed on the coffee table, jolting her from a daydream about Sophie's next recorder lesson. An unknown number flashed, and she almost ignored it. Telemarketers loved rainy days, but something made her pick up. "Ms. Carter?" A man's voice, hesitant, familiar in a way she couldn't place. "This is Nathan Brooks. I used to work for Ethan Reynolds." Her breath caught. Nathan. Skinny, quiet Nathan, who'd handled permits at Reynolds Realty. She'd met him a handful of times before the wedding, always with a shy smile and a coffee run. "What do you want?" she asked, keeping her voice low so Sophie wouldn't hear. "I've got something you should see," he said. "Can we meet? Tomorrow, maybe? There's a cafe on Alberta, Bean and Leaf." She hesitated, glancing at Sophie, now sprawled on the rug with crayons. "Why now, Nathan? It's been years." "Because he screwed me over too," he said, bitterness seeping through, "and you deserve the truth. You." The next day, rain pattered on the cafe's awning as Hannah slid into a booth across from Nathan. He looked older, thinning hair, bags under his eyes, but his hands shook the same way they had when he'd spilled coffee at a staff meeting once. He slid a battered notebook across the table, pages dog-eared and smudged. "He wrote you letters," Nathan said, voice barely above a whisper. "After the wedding. Wanted to come back, explain. Claire burned them all." Hannah stared at the notebook, her pulse racing. "What?" "He was a mess that week," Nathan went on, leaning in. "Told me he couldn't do it. Fatherhood, marriage, the whole deal. Claire got in his head, said she'd make him a king if he walked away. When he tried to turn back, she threatened him, said she'd ruin him with what she knew." "Why should I believe you?" Hannah's voice trembled, anger bubbling up. "He left me, Nathan. End of story." "Because I saw it," he said, eyes locking on hers. "He's a coward, yeah, but she's a snake. I kept this. Notes, emails, proof." She flipped open the notebook, scanning scribbled dates, fragments of Ethan's handwriting. "Tell Hannah I'm sorry. Claire says it's too late." Her chest tightened, a storm of pain and doubt crashing in. Was this real? Had he wanted her back? Or was it just another lie? Before she could answer, the door slammed open, rain gusting in with it. Claire Donovan stood there, soaked but poised, her eyes narrowing as they landed on Hannah. Sophie, who'd tagged along with Diane, peeked from behind her grandma, clutching a juice box. Well, well, Claire said, striding over, her heels clicking like gunfire. The abandoned bride, still digging up the past. Hannah stood, shielding Sophie instinctively. Get out, Claire. Not until you back off, Claire hissed, voice low and venomous. That little stunt in Chicago, your reporter friend sniffing around my business now. Call her off, or I'll make sure your kid knows every dirty detail about her daddy. Sophie's eyes widened, juice spilling onto her sneakers. Mommy? She whispered, voice small. Rage flared in Hannah's chest, white hot and blinding. Threaten my daughter again, she said, stepping closer. And you'll wish you'd stayed in Texas. Claire smirked, unfazed. Try me. Diane ushered Sophie outside, but Hannah didn't budge. She slipped her phone from her pocket, hitting record as Claire leaned in, oblivious. You think you're smart, Claire sneered. But I've got enough on Ethan to bury him. And you, if you push me. Keep talking, Hannah said, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. I'm listening. Claire ranted about Ethan's deals, her plans, her leverage, until she finally stormed out, leaving a trail of wet footprints. Hannah stopped the recording, her breath ragged. Sophie had heard too much, and now the past was clawing its way back. That night, she sat Sophie down on the couch, the recorder lesson forgotten. Baby, she said, brushing a curl from her daughter's face. You heard some stuff today. We need to talk about your dad. Sophie nodded, eyes serious. Is he bad, Mommy? Hannah swallowed hard. He made bad choices. But you're all good. Every bit of you. Across town, Lucas listened to the recording over the phone, his lawyer brain already spinning. We've got her, he said. Assault? Coercion? She's done. In Austin, Ethan stared at his phone, Claire's latest threat flashing. Fix this, or I leak everything. He didn't know Hannah had just turned the tables. Holy cow, things just got wild. If Hannah's stand and Claire's showdown hooked you, hit subscribe to catch the next twist. Comment below, should Hannah use that recording to take Claire down for good? We're not done yet. See you in the finale. The auditorium at Portland's Lincoln High School hummed with anticipation, the air thick with the scent of polished wood and nervous sweat. It was June 14th, a warm evening that had the crowd fanning themselves with programs. On stage, Sophie Carter, 18, stood tall in a black dress, her dark curls spilling over her shoulders. Her cello rested against her knee, its rich mahogany gleaming under the lights. Hannah sat in the third row, 47 now, her hazel eyes glistening as Sophie drew her bow across the strings. The first notes of Bach's Suite No. 1 filled the room, deep, resonant, a sound that seemed to pull every heart into its orbit. Sophie played with a focus Hannah recognized. Her own stubborn grit mixed with something fiercer, something that might have come from Ethan. At 5'6", with his green eyes and her mom's delicate jaw, Sophie was a living bridge between past and present. The music swelled and Hannah's chest tightened. Pride, yes, but also a quiet ache for the years that had led here. Diane sat beside her, gray hair pulled into a neat bun, clapping softly as the final note lingered. Backstage after the recital, Sophie hugged Hannah tight, her cello case bumping against their legs. "Did I do okay, Mom?" she asked, voice muffled against Hannah's shoulder. "Okay?" Hannah laughed, pulling back to cup her daughter's face. "Baby, you were magic up there. I'm so damn proud." Friends and family milled around. Lucas, now sporting a salt and pepper beard, ruffled Sophie's hair. Diane handed out cookies she'd baked that morning. But as the crowd thinned, Sophie's expression shifted. A flicker of hesitation Hannah knew too well. "Mom," she said, fiddling with her necklace. A silver music note Hannah had given her at 10. "I found something in the old photo album, and I Googled him again yesterday." Hannah's heart skipped. She didn't need to ask who. "Let's go home," she said gently. "We'll talk." Their Fremont bungalow was a cozy mess. Sheet music on the coffee table, Sophie's art projects pinned to the fridge. Rain tapped the roof, a Portland constant even in summer. Hannah poured 2 mugs of cocoa, settling beside Sophie on the couch. The photo Sophie had found lay between them. Hannah and Ethan at an Austin gala, his arm around her waist, both grinning like the world was theirs. "That's your dad," Hannah said, tracing the faded edge. "Before you were born." "I know," Sophie replied, her voice steady but curious. She pulled her knees up, studying the image. "I read about the scandal, how he faked those records, how you took him down, and older stuff about the wedding." Hannah nodded, letting her daughter lead. Sophie had always been sharp, piecing together her story from scraps. Internet articles, whispered family talks. At 13, she'd started asking harder questions, and Hannah had answered with honesty, age-adjusted but real. "There's not much about him after that," Sophie went on. "Like he just vanished." "He left Austin," Hannah said, sipping her cocoa. "Last I heard, he's in Chicago, working some low-key job. Nothing like the big shot he used to be." Sophie's brow furrowed, those green eyes searching. "Do you think he ever thinks about me?" The question hung there, soft but heavy. Hannah set her mug down, choosing her words. "I'm sure he does, Soph. But sometimes people can't be the parents kids deserve, not because of you, but because of their own messes. Your dad, he's got a habit of running from the truth." Sophie nodded, processing. "I've been thinking about meeting him. Not now, but maybe when I'm older. Would that be okay?" Hannah's throat tightened, but she smiled. "When you're ready, say 18, if you still want to, I'll back you 100%. It's your story, your call." Later, after Sophie headed out with friends to celebrate, Hannah's phone pinged with an email. The sender's name stopped her cold. Julia Reynolds. Subject: "A message for you and Sophie." She opened it, hands trembling. "Dear Hannah, I'm Ethan's half-sister, Margaret's daughter from a fling she never owned up to. I've known about Sophie for years but stayed away out of respect. Margaret passed last month, and going through her estate, I found something you should know. She set up a trust for Sophie years ago, separate from Ethan's payments, bigger too, and she's been funding your music program anonymously since it started. I've attached her letter. I'd love to meet Sophie someday if you're open to it. Julia." Hannah clicked the attachment, Margaret's crisp handwriting filling the screen. "My son made unforgivable choices. I raised him to win, not to care, and I see my fault in that. This money can't fix what he broke, but maybe it can help the good you've done. Tell Sophie she's better than us." The words blurred as tears welled up. Margaret, cold, commanding Margaret, had watched from the shadows, quietly righting a wrong she'd helped create. It didn't erase the pain, but it shifted something, like a chord resolving in a song. 3 months later, Hannah stood at a podium in Vancouver, addressing the International Association for Child Mental Health. Her navy blazer was a far cry from the thrift store dresses of her early Portland days, her voice carrying the weight of 15 years' work. "Kids who've been betrayed need more than Band-Aids," she said, clicking to a slide of Sophie's smiling face, anonymous to the crowd but everything to her. "We help them turn pain into power so they can say, 'This happened, but it's not who I am.'" Was it? The applause was thunderous, but as she stepped into the hallway, a figure caught her eye. Ethan, older now, leaning against a wall in a worn jacket. His hair was fully gray, his frame thinner, but those eyes still pierced through time. "I didn't expect you here," she said, approaching warily. "Read about your talk," he replied, voice rougher than she remembered. "I work with a kids' center in Chicago now. Your stuff keeps coming up." She crossed her arms, waiting. He shifted, uncomfortable. "How's Sophie?" "She's 18, Hannah said, deliberate. "Plays cello like a dream. Asks about you sometimes." Pain flashed across his face, quickly buried. "I keep that photo." Her hand, from when she was born. Only peace I've got. She might want to meet you someday, Hannah added, watching him closely. Her choice, not mine. Hope flickered, then faded. 5 more years. If she does, I'll be ready. Truth this time. He paused, then met her gaze. What you did, exposing me, the records, the leak, it was justice. Took me years in therapy to see it. I built lies because I couldn't face myself. It wasn't revenge, she said, softer than she meant. It was protection, for Sophie, for me. I know. He smiled, faint and sad. You were right about everything. He turned to go, but Hannah stopped him. You're not the end of her story, Ethan. Or mine. He nodded, disappearing into the crowd. She stood there, the weight of 18 years lifting just a little, not forgiveness, but closure. That night, back in Portland, Hannah sat in their garden, a rare, clear sky glittering above. Sophie's decision at her recital replayed in her mind. I don't need him, Mom. I've got you. That's enough. The girl who'd once asked about her daddy had grown into a woman who knew her worth. Margaret's trust had funded Sophie's college, Juilliard maybe, and Hannah's program now reached kids nationwide. Julia had visited last week, shy but warm, bringing photos of a family Hannah never knew Sophie had. It wasn't the life she'd planned at 28, but it was better, real, hard-won, hers. She sipped her tea, the stars reflecting in the mug. Revenge wasn't Claire's downfall or Ethan's ruin. It was this, a life so full, so true, that their shadows couldn't touch it. Sophie's laughter drifted from the porch and Hannah smiled. This was her legacy, love that outlasted lies. And that's the end of Hannah and Sophie's journey. If their story moved you, hit that subscribe button for more tales of grit and grace. Comment below. What's your takeaway from their triumph? Thanks for sticking with us. See you in the next one.